Hello, and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. All right, well, welcome to another episode of another Cloud Podcast. And today we're really excited. We've got Tyson McDowell. He is the managing partner over at Great Scale Ventures. Not only that, he is an aviator pilot. He did not fly in today, unfortunately, but we have him remotely. And he is also a TEDx speaker. And today we're really excited to talk about AI. But first off, Tyson, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys. It's really great to be on the show. I've been looking forward to it ever since our lunch. And thank you for lunch. It was tasty.
Always good, right? Can't go wrong with Houston's.
Can't go wrong.
And of course, I've got my co-pilot here, Artie Boom. How you doing, bud?
Hey, Alex, I love the pilot analogies. I love that. Hopefully we can continue with that
I'll be your wingman anytime.
The wingman.
Exactly.
All right, Goose. So we're gonna go with new names. You'll be Goose. I'll be Mav. So Tyson, for those that don't know you, give us a quick background. Just how you got to Great Scale, what you're into AI, just a quick career path to where you're at today, and kind of gives us a good overview of how you got into AI.
Yeah. Well, I'm a serial tech entrepreneur at a company that started back in 2000, just out of high school, that made hospital collections more efficient and better for the patients, ultimately improving patient experience while causing money to flow a little bit better. And that was a big contact center problem, data problem, and we ended up implementing a lot of AI techniques along the way that we didn't really recognize as such because it wasn't kind of a thing that people talked about yet, all throughout the 2000s, 2010s. And we sold that business in 2016 to a growth private equity firm. And, we were proud of the impact that it had. It really allowed conversations to occur with patients that were in a lot of emotional trauma around, whatever the health issue was, plus the huge financial fear. And then it's very confusing in healthcare. So big integration problem. And how do you sum all that up into a 3-minute call that causes someone enough comfort to make a huge financial choice that's many cars worth of money. And we pulled that off, and we demonstrated a lot of ability to let technical solutions bring empathy to those conversations and financial health to the health systems that we serve. So did that. I wrote the software, a lot of the software, and then built a team and ran the company for a while. All during that time, was in healthcare finance and healthcare reform and tech. And the smartphone came out, and bandwidth happened, and AI happened, and Tesla showed up. And we didn't go back to the moon, but we certainly we made the Matrix. And that was awesome. I was super excited. So I decided if I'm going to do something new in the world, it better be to build a better internet that I want to live in and my daughter to live in, which brought us to Great Scale Ventures. We found tech companies that do that, and we bring the software to the table and the business models and all the funding, so that we can make good on this beautiful future that we're supposed to have for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. For all of you listening who have not watched the TED Talk, click on the link below. I'm sure we'll put it below the
link in the description. Link
in the description below.
Exactly. And Tyson, you touch on so many great topics there, and of course the TED style is a storytelling style, and you tell it so perfectly. Talk to us a little bit about AI, the good and the bad, and tell us a little bit about what your viewpoint is on AI, machine learning, big data, because our audience is really intrigued about how to use AI, how to use machine learning, how to use all these tools to help support their customers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of things. Firstly, the technologists among us and the people that buy and manage technology have an opinion of what AI is, and their opinion doesn't matter. AI is anything that we humans outsource all of our thinking to. And some of those systems are very dumb. Some of them are brilliant, technically. And I think that there's a big pollution of the conversation because the technologists are so busy debating what AI is, what's the line between logic and AI, what's the line between, is forward chaining inference technique, is that AI? No, it used to be, honestly, like way back in the 80s when we were doing credit card fraud detection, that was AI.
Yeah.
Neural nets became the thing, and then if it didn't have n layers and it wasn't explainable, it wasn't a neural, it wasn't. That's a whole bunch of okay, sure, we can talk about that. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what my TED Talk's about, and that's not what 7 billion people on this earth care about. What we care about is this technology actually smart enough to have our best interests at heart, and to be smarter than we are about suggesting what aligns with those best interests. Great practical examples in the business world. I'm going to filter resumes, AI filtering resumes, because there are 300,000 applicants, whittle it down to 1,000. And we all know about diversity issues and explainability issues, but son of a gun, you're going to impact 100,000 people's career and entire economies with a model that you don't even know how the darn thing was trained. Is it really that smart? So AI is the story of AI is, to me, that it's a child. It's in its adolescent state, and it's kind of a whole colony of children. It's kind of like the Lord of the Flies.
No.
And
That's not a good.
Yeah, and there's no. That's exactly what's going on. But cooler heads are prevailing, and we have an opportunity to change that for ourselves. And then those of us that influence its creation and deployment have an opportunity to change it for everybody.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I'll let Alex ask his next question, but to drill into that a little bit more, I read an article not too long ago, it was about a month ago, about LinkedIn's AI and resumes. You brought a good point up there, and it was funny because it talked about people who had unique names, like myself, spelled Aarde. If I refer to myself in the third person anywhere in my application or my resume, other than just in the name field, it would think that it's a misspelling, and a misspelling on a resume or an application docks my points, and then the AI kind of flags that as not good. This person can't spell or has bad grammar, things like that. So just a great example of these ecosystems that are kind of hodgepodge together, and
Absolutely.
could be designed for good but actually produce bad.
100%, and that's the nature of learning and iteration and agility. So no one intends to be bad. Very few people intend to be bad. The issue is, for some reason, we're in this place of believing that AI is someone else's brilliant invention. And so we sort of suspend belief and let it run amok a bit. And people tend to be afraid to call BS on it when it's wrong, because oftentimes they don't know how it's working, or they rented the algorithm, or the algorithm came from a college or university, or just all kinds of stuff. We don't know how FICO actually behaves and why, and that's a machine learned based application of AI. It's very old. People don't really question it. And you have all these new and novel, rapidly developing applications. The main thing is everybody is smarter than the AI. When something doesn't smell right, fix it, bring it up, fix it.
You mentioned, that it is in its infancy, but it's growing, extremely fast, and everything that everyone's doing, and you have, all these tech companies that are trying to disrupt all these different industries. Yeah. Where do you see the regulations coming into play? Like, is there going to be a regulating body that's going to be able to look at these algorithms and make sure that it is doing good, or is that even on the table right now?
That's already here, and it's Europe, and I'm so impressed with Europe, and I am so unimpressed with America. But the good thing is it doesn't matter. So a good example, when GDPR came in, that's actually an AI control regulation technically. Global data protection rights stipulate the right to be forgotten, the right to delete data, that's inaccurate or old or whatever. And it also modified the authority of opt-in so that someone couldn't be passively opted into a new data dimension that AI can chew on. So that actually comes across as, you can't sell my data unless I let you. But like, for instance, Facebook, as some example, I don't know if it's a literal example, might suddenly decide that you are in cohort 516 politically, whatever that is. And that in your data settings, a whole new setting comes up with a checkbox pre-checked that you're willing to share your political cohort with Facebook for the purpose of advertising, whatever the heck else they do with it. And that was pre-checked. Well, after GDPR, that's not allowed. And you have to go in and manually check it. That was huge, so beneficial. Facebook conversion rates fell through the floor. All this passive extra data that people had amassed on themselves and unknowingly shared got removed, and therefore the AI for ad targeting got weaker, and it should have. What that puts pressure on all of a sudden is that Facebook now has to go and say, I've come up with a new thing and I've tagged you this way. Are you okay if I share that with somebody? And that's absolutely right. It puts pressure on Facebook to tell you then to have to convince you what's in it for you. Is it better ads? Is that good enough for you? Then now it's up to you. And it puts more pressure on the PR of it to actually think about what the user wants, because they got to allow next generation data privacy regulations coming out of Europe coming up absolutely relate to transparency to AI manipulation. So information, if it's been pre-sorted and prioritized, it actually has to tell you that when you see it. And information that was written via automation needs to be disclosed as such to the end user. Another very, very good check and balance to the natural course of AI. What we do in the US and all this monopoly crap, we can go into it if you want to have that conversation, but that's all useless, totally useless. Don't want to do anything.
What are
Yeah,
some
that's-
really quick, Artie, what are some examples of that on the as far as like being notified or if this this whatever's served to you is part of an
Sure.
algorithm or that you're just mentioning?
Yeah, so there was some US regulation pre-GDPR that forced the hand that if you're on a social media wall and you see sponsored content, the fact that it says that it's sponsored content and the
Right.
UI has to have differentiation is one of the first examples of an implementation of that. And that, in fact, I'm not 100% sure. I have to go check my sources, but pretty sure that was regulatory pressure that caused that user experience to shift. So it looks like that. It's just that instead of saying sponsored content, it might say, this content was augmented with automation, or this headline was written through automation, or there are 19 different versions of this headline. It's unclear what all those regulations are going to be yet, but it is clear that they iterate, and in Europe they're iterating in that direction. And the cool thing about tech companies is they're global by accident. They literally, it's kind of like when Trump was trying to get TikTok shut down in the US. It's hard to shut down in the US. It's like either comply with the US in the whole system or block the US. And so you can't block Europe and be a good business online. So you have to comply with the least common denominator regulation, which is great because it also relieves the US from having to be the police in this factor, because that's not politically popular.
Yeah, I remember scrolling through Instagram, I think it was a year ago, when the first time I saw sponsored content. They had a little note that said sponsor. But what I realized, and this was actually yesterday, my wife was going through, she saw some sponsored content, and she on Instagram, she clicked the three little buttons in the upper right of that content, and she could actually report it, block it, or say this content is no longer relevant to me.
Yeah.
Which to me it was like a new feature, and I was like, wow, it's evolved. It's evolved beyond just
Yeah.
them declaring that it's sponsored. Now they're going to the next level and the next level. Do you think future thought with regards to AI and marketing and sponsored content that's just being bombarded to us over all sorts of different channels, whether it's audio, visual, or through social? Where do you see the future on the consumer side? Do you think we're going to have the ability to kind of tell the marketers, this is what I'm interested in, don't show me anything else? Like, I only like barbecues and whatever the things that are of
Yeah.
interest to myself. Do you think there's going to be some kind of user defined ability for the consumer to choose?
I think yes, in certain applications, and those are the ones that I would prefer to use. All this AI works great if to go get a result, and if the result is defined by the end user and it's what the user really wants, let the AI obsess about that user's getting success in that area. Right now, the way that it works is it guesses about who you are. So it already knows that it's assigning you an intent. It's just that the intent is inferred from your historical patterns, who else you know, the cohorts you're in. And then that tends to cause regression in groups, especially with social media. So on the consumer side, like people talk to each other, and they do so in like ways. And you could say that's how fake news spreads. And that's how candidates get elected these days. Candidates that win an election understand one thing. They understand that there are 13,412 specific optimized cohorts of differing opinion on a topic. That's literally kind of how these algorithms look, but you could roll that up into 7 categories. There are 7 messages, all of which are inconsistent, some of which are polar opposites. I, as a candidate, can tell, I know that I'm talking to cohort 7, and I'm going to say that the sky is blue. I'm going to talk to cohort 9 or 1, and I'm going to say the sky is green. The two will amp each other up in excitement and agreement. And occasionally someone will come in and say, no, the sky is green, you people, not blue. And those in that universe, they get flamed out of existence. The information or even the idea the sky is green is 1 in 100 across all of the whatevers. And the exact same opposite world is true in cohort 1. So that's the after effect of systems that don't ask you what you want. They infer what you want. And then people like Mark Zuckerberg say, clearly people like content that's abusive. Clearly people like saying negative things about each other. Of course they like going on and only have 7-second content snippets. And of course they like Instagram Live. They don't quote like it. They've been observed to go there and then driven to go there more. And therefore the data looks like they like it. So I think that will be in the future. There are going to be different systems serving a more intentional advertiser in the consumer space. In the tech space, like in the enterprise space, this all matters in a lot of ways, because ultimately what's governing enterprise and just all this stuff, even faster than regulation, is liability and liability insurance for the company. So, a lot of this AI stuff, we can talk about it in consumer land and with politics and regulation, and it's a little bit hearsay. In enterprise land, you can install a system that takes you from HR compliant to not. You can install a system that takes you from GDPR compliant to not. And you can do it. You can install a system, and we're not you might be totally sewed up around hacking and security and stuff like that, and introduce a feature that causes someone to be excluded. And then once you have a violation of that, you can't get D&O insurance. Right? So the insurance companies know this, the board members know this, the risk committees of boards of public companies know this, and they're the ones putting real pressure on enterprise. It's like, you can play with the sizzle, but you better be sure. And that's why you get these innovation departments willing to do a lot, but then it's tougher to go deeper.
Yeah, and for some of the people who are listening to this podcast, they run sales and marketing or customer service teams, and whether they know it or not, they're potentially using AI, whether it's Facebook ads or something, having to do with contacting or communicating with their customers in a more outbound fashion.
Yeah.
So if you were in the like decision making room with some of the people who are potentially listening, like a SVP of marketing or customer service, but what would be some of the advice that you would give to them? Lean into this, or maybe really hone in into what you should be using this AI for. Tell us a little bit about your, how you advise or consult people
Yeah.
who are dipping their toes into it.
Yeah, well, I kind of start with what are the headlines that I equate to hype? What are the headlines that can frustrate your ability to make good choices? And one of them is that AI is powered by big data. Send big data out and get great answers back. And in almost all enterprises, unless you're doing something truly big data related, like predicting earthquakes or the weather, you have a business process and you want to use AI to enhance the cost value proposition and the customer value proposition. You're in a business that is doing a very tight domain activity, whether it's legal document processing or whether it's supply chain audit or whether it's collecting on car loans or whatever. You have a process that you can understand and study, and AI can make that process more efficient. And the moment you try, you realize it's dumb because you have smart people that understand your business. So listen to those people, let them iterate, let them control the AI. It's partnering up. AI's job is to take the best of knowledge and just multiply it in the enterprise case, in my opinion, almost all the time. So not forgetting, in fact, doubling down on the fact that you use iterative product management, invite all the stakeholders, gut check the output and results, produce really accurate training data with very manually, thoroughly audited processes, send 800 data samples to a machine learning thing, and come back and see if that model then agrees with the quality assurance of let's say that you're doing call center quality assurance coaching. Like, yeah, I can just buy an algorithm that gives my reps a call center score of 1 to 5. How the heck did that thing get trained? That's fine. Start with that, but compare it to your best QA people doing a thorough QA process, and find out how right it is, because it's wrong. And what you do with that new data that's compared is you send that to a machine learning service and you get your own version of an algorithm and iterate. So really the best advice is AI is not going to teach you anything new and brilliant about your process. It's going to remember what you learned was new and brilliant about your process and automate it. Very different use case.
It reminds me of an Office episode where Dwight Schrute was up against the e-commerce site at Dunder Mifflin, and it was a battle of if he could beat them or not. But it's kind of the same way. You take your best sales rep or your best agent, compete against the algorithm, and see where, then look at those results and see where it comes out. Like, is it truly giving you the answers you want? And I talked to a lot of IT executives, and we had someone on the podcast 2 days ago we were talking about big data. And he was saying he did a course at Harvard where only 5% of corporate data is even being used for, for learning, right? For business intelligence. And then and he said a big piece is just knowing what questions to ask. You can have all this data, but if you're not teaching this child, algorithm to ask the right questions, it's going to be all over the board.
Yeah. And another and another framework that I think people can apply is when you have an AI model, it's a new employee performing a new role.
That's a good way to look at it.
Treat it the same exactly as that. And it just so happens this new employee has an unlimited amount nearly of productivity in them, which is dangerous when it's a really, really new employee performing a brand new role. So whenever I look at information systems that actually model teams, I have automation and human beings are both classified as the same actor. And they are treated with the same level of requirement to prove value. They are treated with the same requirements to do incrementally reducing quality assurance cycles. They're all measured by the same KPIs and indicators. They're all optimized as a cohesive team. In the enterprise setting, AI is a teammate, and it's got to earn its keep and earn your trust, just like a human.
Yeah, it's a really, really good call out. We did a podcast a while ago where someone was talking about the human-centric outcomes, and they're not even dipping their toe in automation or AI today, but everything they do, every meeting that they have, they make sure that they have that phrase up on the wall. You know, what is the human-centric outcome? What are we going to do or produce? What's the outcome going to be? What's the result? I love the idea that AI or whatever this tool set is that you're trying to implement, treat it as another employee, pull that, you know, physical being out and call it out and say, what is the purpose of this self-service bot or whatever it is? Because if it doesn't have some sort of human-centric outcome, it's either not going to be successful or it's not going to be received very positively from your customers and members. So
absolutely. And who's going to supervise it? You know,
Yep.
if AI were really an employee, it would have a boss.
Yep.
And if it misbehaved, you'd know by way of certain metrics like customer success or complaint rate or efficiency level or misappropriation of resources. And whoever is responsible would say, yeah, it's misbehaving. So what's the performance improvement plan? And go back and fix the dang thing.
So
a lot of people just kind of let it do its thing and they think it's working out of the box, and that's insane.
What are some examples that you've seen where people or companies have done it really well in the specific use case where they have trained this new employee and have taken it from an infant employee to just kicking ass?
One example, I don't know, this is now a couple of years ago, but I met the self-appointed ethics team at Amazon for the HR hiring process, and they're big data engineers that took it upon themselves to try to whittle a large number of resumes down to a smaller number of resumes, and a specific outcome requirement for the AI algorithm was rateable diversity. And that's a hard training set to do, because it's like, for the resumes that are attached to prior successful people, the reality is that older white men have a greater density in that data set of success. And you can blame society or you can blame, it doesn't matter why that's true. Mm-hmm. So when you have a training set that's already naturally what's called biased, that's a problem. They brought a ton of engineering might to the table and data science might to engineer bias out of that. And as far as I understand it, I wasn't on that team. I just got the pleasure of talking to a couple of people who were passionately leading that. They thought they got it down. They ran it. It didn't meet their tests and they shut it down. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if it's been modified and turned back on in other ways. This was a one-time interaction I had, but that was a great example. Thesis, apply, learn, stop, do it again. You know, don't just set it and forget it. It's not Ron Popeil's food dehydrator. We don't know if it's going to work. So that's a really good example. And then where they are successful, going way back, and I like talking about this just because it shows you that this all is not new. You know, credit card fraud detection and intervention is a very AI centric thing. And that does it really well. You know, I'm going to block your card. They reach out to you with human workflow. Was this you? Was this not you? Mm-hmm. But I still blocked the card. I'm going to back that up with a real-time response, do a verification or not. and release the transaction going forward. That is a incredible application of AI. It's automatically corrected because it includes a human verification step before it takes super action. Temporary block, business process, positive human identification verification. Am I right? Am I wrong? It's always, every time. Am I right? Am I wrong? And it's optimizing the human cost of doing that verification and intervention process. So that's a great, that's a very mature AI system, a human AI combination that I think people should study.
Now, changing gears a little bit and talking more hypothetical or more of your viewpoint. Let's say the way that we use AI as a society doesn't really change. We're kind of on this path today, and it's going to continue down that path. Do you think it's going to be harder for a consumer or for us as humans or as individuals to be able to change our viewpoints? Because if we start liking football things, football is just going to be in our feed, and we'll never be able to say, you know what, maybe I like soccer or softball or whatever that is. It's going to kind of be drowned out by what you like and being surfaced to you.
Yeah. It's going to get a little bit worse, and then it's going to get better no matter what we do or how intentionally we are about it. I look back in history and things always wobble around. And to quote a masterpiece of a movie, Jurassic Park, nature finds a way. I think that was when the frog DNA or whatever made the dinosaurs that were all men. Some of them became women. Anyway.
That sounded just like Jeff Goldblum right there.
Yeah. Nature finds a way.
Right.
Yeah, it's that's true. Now, there is something that was really interesting in our business. We were exposed to a report, an analyst company that talks about human attention. And up until fairly recently, in the last year or so, we had more attention to give, we consumers. So anytime there was a new thing, there was attention available to consume that thing. However, in the last few years, that is not true. We are information saturated to the point where a competitor to Peloton is Netflix, right? You don't normally think of it that way, but it's absolutely true. Both a time and attention competitor and a wallet competitor. And there's just not enough room. So now we say, now everything is being sold to people with zero more time and attention. They might have money, but they don't even have time and attention.
Yeah.
So that means that for the businesses to succeed, they must get better at penetrating that and telling stories about why their thing is going to have a 10x payoff in time and attention and money. Yeah. So just to get trialed, let alone bought. So it naturally moderates goods and services and social media towards understanding the people. But it requires all of us to be so saturated and flaming each other and unopen-minded and evil and angry that it's actually ultimately the advertiser's self-interest that pulls us back out of it. And amazing products that do amazing things, and people begin to be hungry for that. But so if you just don't intervene, it'll fix itself, and it'll take 25 years. And there's going to be a generation that my daughter's in, which is the reason why she's 2.5, and that our daughter, my wife Erica and I's daughter, I can't say my daughter because it's she's Erica's pride and joy just as much. And she has all of her craziness and stubbornness. Anyway,
we'll edit that part out. Don't worry.
Oh, good. I love them both. But she's going to be in this environment where we're maxed out on attention. We're abused. All this adolescence has been let free, and everything's running amok. And it's going to be hard to know what's an opinion. It's going to be hard to tell if chasing that view count is more valuable than earning that dollar. Is there a payoff for going out and having an opinion and asking a vulnerable question, but all these people just tell me I'm stupid. Is that going to double her down on believing she's stupid and have her resort to anxiety drugs? And that all sounds so dumb, but it actually happens a lot. And it doesn't sound dumb anymore, which is scary to me. So we're going to keep going down that path for a while until it hits the profits of the clickbait type methodologies and of the superficial stuff. When the insurance claims start coming through for people that have been violated by these systems, when the company's boards of directors and shareholders are facing real and severe financial liability for the actions and the results of these systems, then you end up with legal reform, then you end up with case law prosecution, then you end up with insurance refactoring, then you end up with new software. And underneath, the entrepreneurs like those in our venture firm are building for that new future, where the product better be 10 times better and more valuable, gosh darn it, or it's just not going to win. So when you kind of add in each of those, everything I said there is like a 5-year cycle, so and there's like 5 of them. It's 25 years. There's some thinking behind it.
Well, it's interesting how greed gets you in and greed is going to get them out, right? Get us out of those problems. But, and you touched on it, right? With your startups that you guys are working with, and this, and we talked about before, making the internet good again, and how you have a different approach to what you're chasing, right? It's not just the dollars, right? When like the Facebooks and the Amazons, they're all just heavily invested in shareholder value, and they're going to do everything they can to squeeze that as much as they can out of it. Talk a little bit about just, your approach and how you're looking at these startups that you guys are funding, and how you want to make, and how they're going to make the internet better and kind of shorten that 25-year cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the way we want to shorten the cycle is by showing that you can make money while doing good and have objective financial results in both categories as soon as possible. So that's the first thing that we're doing. You said it, actually. My partner was at Microsoft for a lot of years. He was Bill Gates' technical advisor as part of that job during that time. He's a philanthropist. He's an engineer. He's amazing. Aaron Contor. I love him. Very lucky to have him with me. The two of us went and engineered an ethical AI design, and ultimately concluded that, yes, that's helpful, but you have to fix the shareholder incentive problem. Tech grows from the United States primarily because of the free market, which is what's in a shareholder primacy state, meaning it's all about the shareholders and the shareholders making money, not about the end users also making money, and about the employees having a good middle class experience and being able to afford where they live, and having good work-life balance and long-term quality of life and durability that comes from a 35-year-old company trying to be a 100-year-old company. These are 2-year-old companies trying to become 7-year-old IPOs, where user growth causes the valuation of the company to be representative of what the size of the company should be 10 years from now. So the shareholders are getting paid on selling the valuation to the public someday. And the public overpays for that valuation because they can see the ridiculous growth rate, they can see the popularity, and they will pay for what that company will be worth some other day, which incents everything towards rapid user growth. The easiest way to get users' attention is clickbait and superficial addictive behavior, and attract them to watch the live stream because we want their eyeballs all the time, and that kind of stuff. That is the problem. And now those don't work in an attention saturated consumer environment like we just talked about. So it will correct itself. Grayscale just says we have to be investors that are happy with exits at different valuations than super crazy ones. And we have to make sure that our companies use their capital effectively and efficiently, that we solve real world problems. We're very happy with our smaller, more effective and happier employee base and user base. because the valuation is plenty for us investors. It's plenty for the founder. It's plenty for the employees' option pools. And the product is producing financial and well-being value for the users. And we can be proud and happy. And I can show that dollar for dollar, we return just as much as Andreessen Horowitz. We didn't deploy as many dollars. It wasn't as flashy, but gosh darn it, we're proud and we made just as much, but we just used way fewer dollars doing it because we bothered to build a real business of real value as opposed to a hype business of potential value. That's the difference.
I love that. And you just touched on so many great points. I know we could talk for probably like 6 more hours straight.
Yeah.
Just something I wanted to add to it, because you use the term users a lot here. And I just read a book called Hooked. And in the book, it talks about, attention grabbing, and it's actually helping people design products that can grab attention and grab users. And the negative effects that can come from that. And one of the things that he mentioned, and it was kind of a light bulb when I read the line, was there's only a couple industries out there that refer to their customers as users. That's the drug industry. They are, if you smoke pot or if you do illegal drugs, you're a user. And it's also a lot of social media. So if you're using social media, you are a user, you're not a consumer or a customer. So it's great to hear that there's companies like yours, there are people like you who are thinking about converting the business processes so that you're not treating them as users and getting their attention span or their time or whatever that is. And you're focusing on giving them something that they actually want, and they can put down the tool or the system whenever they want, and they can go about their day-to-day lives with healthy work-life balance. So you're doing an amazing job. We'd love to have you on the podcast another 2, 4, 5 times. We love this type of conversation. But Tyson, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. And Alex, thank you so much for hosting and bringing this all together.
Yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely. It's been a blast. And Tyson, maybe next time we'll do a 4-1, and we'll have Erica on as well. We'll talk about Dialpad again.
Oh yeah. Wow, that'd be a lot of fun.
We can ask some really awkward questions. That'll be perfect.
All right, everyone, come back. We're gonna have spousal combat. It'll be excellent over text.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Tyson.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.